Self-hosting your own AI is supposed to get cheaper the more you use it, and I just measured that it doesn't. I ran the exact same model on a laptop I own and on a hosted API, then priced every token both ways: speed, cost per million, and a full year's bill. Before a single number, here's the promise this channel runs on. Everything you're about to see is reproducible. By the way, if you want to run these benchmarks yourself, I've linked the raw JSON data and the React code I'm using in the description for free. Here's the matchup, and the one rule that keeps it honest. The same model on both sides. On the side I own, Llama 3.1, 8 billion parameters, running on my 8 GB laptop through a Llama. On the rented side, the identical model, same weights, served by Groq's API. The workload is 5 frozen prompts that look like a real agent chores. Refactor some code, write a SQL query, find a bug, exploit a concept, and draft a plan. Same prompts, same token budget, run twice on each side, measured the same way. I'm deliberately not pitting a tiny local model against some giant cloud model. That would rig the result before we start. This is the fairest fight I can build. One model, two places to run it, your own wall socket or somebody else's data center. The only things that change are how fast it answers and who pays the bill. The entire money calculation is smaller than you think, and here it is. It's the function the whole episode turns on. Rent equals your electricity plus your hardware spread over its lifetime, solved for the monthly token volume where the two meet. There's one line that matters, and it's the early exit. If renting already costs less per token than your electricity, the margin goes negative, and the function returns nothing. No break even at any volume. Keep that in mind, because in about 2 minutes, my real measured numbers are going to walk straight into it. Start with raw speed, because it frames everything that follows. On my laptop, that 8 billion model generates about 8.5 tokens per second, slow enough that a single answer takes a little over half a minute to finish. Across the 5 prompts, it ranged from roughly 6 to 9 tokens a second. It's never quick. The same model on Groq comes at around 470 tokens a second, with answers landing in under half a second, and on the fastest prompt, it touched 600. That's about 56. That's about 56 times faster. It isn't a small edge, it's a completely different experience. If you ever watched a local model dribble words onto the screen, while the hosted one finishes instantly, this is that, quantified. And yes, beefier hardware narrows the speed gap, but beefier hardware also costs more, which is exactly the trade we're about to put a price on. So, renting wins on speed by a mile, and that part I expected. Data centers run faster accelerators than a laptop ever will. No shock there. The reason people self-host anyway is the belief that owning is cheaper in the long run, that if you just run the thing enough, cheap electricity eventually beats the per token bill. That is the claim I actually care about tonight, so let's set speed aside completely and put both lanes on the same cost footing. Dollars per million tokens, worked out the same way on each side, with every input in the file below. Here's the number I genuinely did not expect: the price per million tokens. Groq served this model at 5 cents per million tokens and 8 cents out. Call it 6.5 cents blended, and that's their published rate, verified on the pricing page. My laptop's cost is pure electricity at my tariff, and the power the machine actually draws under load. Grinding out a million tokens at 8.5 tokens a second works out to about 34 cents. Just to sit with that for a second, my own hardware, counting only the power bill, is already roughly 5 times more expensive per token than renting. Because it's so slow, it sips electricity for hours to make what Groq makes in seconds. I still haven't mentioned the cost of a laptop. And that comparison still ignores the most expensive part of owning, the machine itself. Call it $1,500 spread across 3 years. The rented side never spends a penny of that. No hardware, no depreciation, nothing upfront ever. So owning doesn't just lose on electricity, it starts every single month already $1,500 behind, and then loses a little bit more with each million tokens. 2 separate losses stacked on top of each other. At that point, you can probably guess the shape of the 12-month chart, but it's worth seeing, because it drives a stake through a piece of advice you have heard a million times. At that point, you can probably guess the shape of the 12-month chart, but it's worth seeing, because it tries to stake through a piece of advice you have heard 100 times. Put a full year on one chart, and the argument simply ends. This is 12 months of running cost at a steady 50 million tokens a month, a genuinely busy automation workload. This is 12 months of running cost at a steady 50 million tokens a month, a genuinely busy automation workload. The rented line creeps from about $3 up to about 39 across the entire year. The owned line opens north of 1500. That's the harder on day one, and only climbs from there as the meter ticks. The two never meet. There is no month where owning pulls ahead, not even distantly. By December, you have spent $39 renting, or about 1700 owning the very same work. That is more than 40 times as much to own it. A while back, on a different workload, I actually found a crossover month, a real point where owning starts to win. So I went in fully expecting to find one. This time, the math hands back nothing, and it's not even close. There is no break-even token volume, not a million tokens a month, not a billion. Renting stays cheaper in every scale, because the per token price already favors the API before the hardware even joins the equation. When your marginal cost is higher and the other side's fixed cost is zero, there is simply no volume that flips it. That's the headline, and it caught me off guard about as much as it might be catching you. So, should you ever own one of these rigs? Yes, just not for the reason everyone repeats. Self-hosting stops being a money decision and becomes an everything else decision. Data that legally cannot leave your building, running with no internet and no exposure to a vendor's downtime, price hikes, or rate limits. Latency you control end to end. The freedom to fine-tune and keep the weights that are genuinely yours. Those reasons are real, and for some of you, they sell it on their own. But notice that not one of them is it cheaper per token, because at a small model's price, it simply is not. Own your hardware for control, for privacy, for independence. Don't buy it expecting the power bill to undercut an API, because my own rig just showed it does not. Here's the verdict, measured rather than guessed. For a small model at today's prices, rent the tokens. It's faster and much cheaper, full stop. Owning earns its place when control is worth more than the bill, or for the verifiable repetitive grind where a box you already own quietly pays for itself in other ways. The job of this channel isn't to pick a team for you, it's to get the real number on the table so you can pick for yourself. Next episode, I run the identical teardown on vector databases, Pinecone, Quadrant, and PG Vector, same measured versus model rules, real recall, and the real monthly cost at scale. Today's data and code are linked below. If you want that vector DB number the moment it lands, subscribe. This has been the validation set. I'll see you in the next one.